Congratulations
Yeah,
on being
thank
part
you.
of YC Batch 2020.
Thank
What
you. Yeah.
advice would you give to entrepreneurs looking to apply and get accepted into YC? Like, are there any specific aspects of the
Mhm.
application or the traits that you believe are crucial for success?
Yeah. So I applied to YC twice actually. So once with a different idea a couple years back, and then once with this idea which I got in for. So one, don't give up. Like there's many people who it is one of the most competitive like accelerators, if not the most competitive in the world. So don't give up. Second, I would say just like it's a very no BS sort of community. And also accelerators. One main thing I learned, and like I also give this feedback whenever I'm reading applications, is like just make it super straightforward. Like I think sometimes we like to use a lot of different like fluff words of like I will do this and this is like they're just like, okay, what are you doing? Like you should be able to explain your product and company and your value props and your users in plain English and very straightforward. Like no need for fluff words. And obviously, I think they keep stressing this, and it seems like the most obvious. Work with your customers, work with your users. Start from there. Don't over engineer any solution. Even if you say like, I think we've seen waves of hype as well within the tech community. So don't just like do something for the sake of doing. Start with the user, start with the customer, start with the problem, and then build a solution from there. That's the main thing. I think there's a lot of people like, I want to do there's a lot of like entrepreneurial energy that comes from like, I just want to do a startup. And it's like, well, like, okay, you want to do a startup? Great. Like, what problem do you want to solve? And who are you solving for? And are they willing to pay for it? And then engineer your solutions. So I think that's one of like the key things to keep in mind is start from the user, start from the customer, and start from the problem and build from there.
The way to get into YC is to be able to do two things. One is be able to make a product, so be able to build a product and be able to like sell a product or like get revenue or users or something along those lines. If you can do those two things, I think like that takes you like very far. I think it's less helpful if you just apply with an idea. It's more helpful if you're like, okay, like I made this MVP and I have like 10 paying customers. It doesn't have to be big. It has to just be something small. And then just showing that like, okay, I can make this happen. Gives them the confidence to be like, okay, you're a resourceful individual who will make things happen. It's like the Airbnb founders. They tried 3 or 4 times to make their thing work and it didn't work. And to pay the bills, they sold cereal. And so when you see something like that, you're just like, okay, these guys are going to win in some, I don't know how big it's going to be, but they will win in some way because they don't give up. They're sort of like cockroach mode founders. You just can't kill them. And so I think if you can showcase those kinds of things, I think you'll be in a good place. I think the second thing is do make sure that your idea is venture backable. Like you do want to think about like, am I operating in a market that's large enough and all that kind of stuff? But I'd say that's secondary. Honestly, if you just like do the first two things, you'll pivot into something that's big enough eventually. And they understand that as well. YC is a great program. Very great community. Lots of like amazing founders. I think PG and now Gary Tan, a lot of like very good energy around that. I think a lot of people think YC is a solution. It's just like, oh, if I get into YC, I will be successful. And then maybe if you're very young, you think that way. If I get into if I get into this college, I'm going to be successful. Or if I get this job, I'm going to be successful. If I get into YC, you're collecting accolades almost, or you think like you can checkbox your way to success, however you define success. So the first thing I would say is getting into YC or YC does not necessarily it's not going to like magically make your company. Ultimately, you are the one who needs to make your company work. YC is something that could be helpful along that journey, essentially. And so I just want to take a step back and say, like, with YC or without YC, you can succeed as a founder. There are lots of great, like, amazing companies that have been built by people who are not in Silicon Valley, haven't gone through YC, haven't done any of this stuff. They just figure out, okay, there's demand, I can create value, and then they're very resourceful about doing that. So I'll get that out of the way. So once that's out of the way, assume like, okay, now you decide, okay, I want to do YC. Ask yourself if YC is right for you. I think YC is good for like certain types of companies.
Yeah.
Ask yourself if you would benefit from YC. I think YC is very good for companies which want to raise funding at great terms. I think the demo day process that they have is good for that. You do take dilution up front from YC, and so just make sure that the economics work out for you. I think YC is good for B2B companies which want to maybe this used to be more true than it is today, but if you want to like get some other companies, if you're selling to tech companies, get other tech companies to test out your stuff early on, maybe it's a little bit helpful there. I think for other types of companies, just ask yourself, okay, like what do I want out of a YC before going in? Just make sure you have a good answer to that before you do it.
So like if I were to sort of roll back and say, what is my advice? I would say there's three things. Be knowledgeable about your space. This is where the founder fit comes into. Like go into it knowing the space, knowing what you're going to work on. Be bold, have a vision that is scary and maybe creepy, but true, right? Like be bold with that vision. And third, very important thing that I see values we see that every day is be honest. Like be honest to yourself at least. Like that's so important. If you're not honest every single day, you will just take a much longer time to fail, and that's not going to do good to anybody. So yeah, being honest is something that I've seen all the way from the application till today. Maybe I can share my story here. We applied to YC with an idea, and went into the interview trying to like sell that idea, how like that's going to be great and like will change the world. And the first 10 minutes were probably the worst minutes of that interview because what I'm getting to is like, they know that you're not killing it on day one. They know you're not here to crush it, because if you were, like, you wouldn't even go through any of this, right?
Yes.
And startups are hard. Like the whole point is to struggle before you see light, right? The point where it started to get real and genuine is when I actually personally thought in that interview that, never mind, this is not going anywhere. Let me just be very genuine and honest about what I understand and what I'm thinking this would be.
Yeah.
And so I left all of that like stress and the terror of, oh my God, like need to get into YC, whatnot. I left that aside and I was just like, all right, let me brainstorm with you. What are the growth problems I'm seeing in this company? And let me talk to you through a vision that I think makes sense. And my vision in that moment was like, every piece of content will be very uniquely personalized for every user in the future. With AI stepping in, it's not going to be personalization by product and user attributes. It's going to be truly personalized. Every user will see a completely different version of content, and we can make that possible. It's time for us to get into that.
It really brings me back to the last winter 1 year ago. And first of all, please apply YC. YC is super helpful, especially when you do B2B SaaS like we do. You have so much, you can meet so many great people, great companies through YC. So apply YC. And I think YC is betting on the founders. They believe when founders meet the right problem for them, amazing things will happen. So it is important to show why you are the right person to solve this problem and why the problem matters to you. And to prove that you are the right founder to work on this idea, it's always good to show some numbers, right? To show the progress, no matter when you started working on. So if you prove that you are moving fast and you are the right founder to go after this problem, then your application will be extended.
One thing that I've seen work for companies really well is, their focus on application is a lot, because in the interview you just get 10 minutes. Major filtering happens from application to the interview. So making sure that your application is very, very clear, concise, is really, really important, without any lot of, buzzwords. That's something that's really important. YC also really appreciates, good technical background. And if you've built some product before or scaled some product before, or, have some experience building products, that really helps as well. I think technical expertise for YCs are really, really, required. And in our case, we were still college students, but we'd built a product before which we had scaled to thousands of users, and that's what probably gave YC conviction that we can build technical product as well. So I think that was really important. And I think apart from that, just showing that as a founder you can hustle a lot, and then you can basically get anything done if you actually want to do it. I think that's something that they appreciate a lot, which is founder hustle. And co-founder, having co-founders really helps. As a solo co-founder, it's really, really difficult to get into YC, or in general, it's really difficult to build a startup because there's so many ups and then so many downs, 100x number of downs that you go through. And as a solo founder, it's just very difficult to go through it. So having a really good co-founder and having a good dynamic, like technical co-founder is really important, but having someone on the business side, that's something that really helps as well.
I think with as with any other early stage investment, accelerators generally look at what is your ability to have unique customer insights. That's something that a lot of first-time founders, early founders in the journey kind of forget. So I think being super focused on customers is more important than the product. It's more important than how you're hiring. It's more important than anything else, actually. So if there's something unique that you have identified about your users, which incumbents don't understand yet or haven't implemented for whatever reason, I think that like being able to showcase that in a convincing manner in your pitch, in your application to YC, I think that's the best kind of traction that you could show.
But I think, I think Y Combinator is a great network, and if you have something like their premise is like build something that people want, and if you have something that you are really, really building, and you truly believe that a product which people want, you're leveraging technology. I think technology is something that is really valued at Y Combinator. So if you're building technology which people really need, have desire for, and you have a strong case for it, I think Y Combinator is a great community for you to go be a part of, learn from them. I think go in with an expectation that you will come out learning a lot, and you'll be a different company by the end of it.
I think the biggest takeaway from YC definitely has been the community, I would say, right? So when you go into YC, you go with, let's say, 200 odd other companies in the batch. So you obviously you can't obviously interact with all 200 companies, but there are obviously, YC organized events, YC organized office hours, group office hours and stuff like that. But you can get to interact with a lot of them, right? And first of all, you realize that you are not alone in this journey, right? So that really helps mentally, obviously. But even more importantly is that you can feed off each other's energy and experience and learnings, right? Because so these are, pack of 200 sort of companies that maybe, I'm not saying that they are the best in the world, but probably near about that, right? And you sort of, it also fast tracks a lot of your progress, right? So let's say someone in the batch has some experience of doing something, right? Maybe even as simple as, building an LLM application or something, right? It's a very open community. They post the experience there on the internal forum, and we get to learn from that, right? So next time I try building something, I do not need to go through those steps of experimentation again. I already have that, right? So it's a community. I think it's kind of like a secret society, right? That is really binding, really helpful, really selfless, right? That really helps. On top of that, right, we get to have dedicated office hours with YC partners, right? Right. I think these are really brutal, honest, and probably the most transparent 20-30 minute conversation I have had with any VCs. Right. And I think thirdly, if you're trying to sell in US, if you're building a SaaS product or trying to sell in US, YC itself has a lot of SaaS companies that you can reach out to for the SEO of the market or even selling, right? So that also helps. A lot of it, I think it gives a huge, I would say, head start into the US market if you're looking to sell it.